Good evening, everyone. I'd like to say good night, good evening to everyone, and we're here with a very special guest, Rui Costa Pimenta. He's president of the Workers' Coast Party from Brazil, and would like to also welcome Marcos Garcia from the Venezuelan consulate and embassy. He'd like to say a few words to the audience.
Okay, thank you. Well, we are welcome friends from Brazil, Rui Costa Pimenta. We are welcome to the Venezuelan embassy for this kind of event. You know, we have elections recently. Many of you attended some demonstration in Trafalgar Square. The outcome of the election surprised some people outside Venezuela, not Venezuelan people, or at least the revolutionary government of Venezuela, because in the middle of attack at different levels, attacking the economy, the distribution of food, the value of the currency, the electricity system, the telephone company, the financial system, making it impossible to make any more at international level. Right now, they're trying to organize with the sanctions some kind of blockade to the oil export of Venezuela. So that was the question, and I the question. But the problem they have, you know, in the election was that the opposition was divided. The sector of the opposition was divided in the U.S. to, even though they were talking with the government, and they almost signed an agreement to organize elections that would have that moment. The day when they were supposed to sign the agreement, the representative of the opposition received a call from Colombia with the foreign affairs minister of the U.S. and they didn't sign it. They split, you know, because our sector, small sector of the opposition, decided to sign the agreement. And they went to the election and they got confidence and they were divided. And President Maduro got almost 68% of the votes in the election. It was surprising. It's very surprising to look at the situation of the country and the people to the state. But at the same time, it shows you the level of consciousness that some people have about the situation, unless a sector of the population, connected with the revolutionary movement. I think this victory of Venezuela is very important for Latin America. It shows that it's possible to defeat the U.S. They are not in this, you know, they can do whatever they want in any country. Because, you know, you see what they did in Honduras in the last election. They just did the election. And what something happened, see what happened in Paraguay. We're going to have election in Colombia and Mexico. And see what happens. The situation in Venezuela we can, with unity, with the clear program, with the intelligent leadership, and strong grassroots organization, the participation of our own forces. You know, there are different elements in the situation of Venezuela that explain the reality. So now we have our friend from Brazil who's going to talk about another situation that which is quite difficult, and it's so important because Brazil is huge, you know, it's like America, the half of Brazil. So it's so important for us. And I guess that the experience we have been developing in Brazil can be helpful for friends in Brazil or somewhere in Brazil. So many people have been criticizing the President Maduro from the left. Trying to portray him in a way which is some kind of inefficient president, I don't know what he's doing. make a lot of mistakes. Well, we're making mistakes, but that's normal when you are in power. But at the same time, we are making a lot of good decisions that are expressed in the outcome of election, and that has to be recognized. So, I'm not the one that is supposed to talk here today. I welcome our friend from Brazil, Rui Costa Pimenta.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the Venezuelan authorities for the kind concession of this beautiful hall, and the people that helped to put together this meeting, Comrade Adriano, Nara, and other people, and to say that we have a very important discussion because we have a very critical situation in Brazil. In Venezuela, as the first speaker mentioned, we have a very difficult struggle, and the election was a very important victory of the Venezuelan people against imperialism. And I would like to relate the coup in Brazil to the situation in Venezuela. I would like to say, in the first place, that many people are not aware of this situation, but we have a continental coup going on in Latin America at this moment. We have the situation in Venezuela. We have Argentina, Paraguay, Ecuador, Bolivia. Almost all countries are being subjected to some kind of political operations that are an open coup d'etat, as happened in Brazil or Paraguay, Honduras, or we have a coup d'etat which is hidden behind some kind of political maneuvers. I think this idea is very, very important, that it's a continental crisis. It's a continental crisis created by imperialism, particularly North American imperialism, and it's not a national phenomenon. It's not a problem of, for example, as the press insists, a bad government in Venezuela, in Brazil, or popular content, but it is a plan that has been organized, fought by an exterior force, exterior to all the countries that are suffering with imposed governments, with governments which have not really been elected by the population, but have been put in place by force, by an exterior power. It would be a very big mistake to think that the Brazilian government was deposed because it was a government that made such and such error, that had a mistaken policy on this or that question, issue, it would be a very, very bad mistake. What we have is an attempt to revert the situation that was created some 15 years ago, 18 years ago, by a popular movement in various countries. Venezuela is one of the most important, against a policy that was destroying each and every one of the Latin American countries. We had in Venezuela, we had an attempted coup against the Venezuelan president, Hugo Chavez, and we had a popular rising against this coup. We had a popular rising in Bolivia against the neoliberal policies of the local government, inspired by the United States. We had very many important movements in Ecuador, in Argentina, and all those movements created the conditions, the probability for left-wing governments in Latin America, in very many countries, including Brazil. And what we are seeing today is an operation carefully thought to eliminate all those governments, to impose a new and massive and very brutal attack on the population of all those countries. What we see in Venezuela is an economic sabotage from without. All the economic difficulties are caused by this political pressure, sabotage, boycott, and we have, in this way, a continental struggle that is fought by Latin American population with very little conscience about what is going on. I think this is the correct point of departure to understand the Latin American situation and the situation in Brazil. I say this because in Brazil we have very many debates about what the government, the PT government, had done to be deposed by the Congress. It's a useless discussion. We can criticize any government. As was said here, government, people in power make mistakes, of course. We can have an ideological debate on the question, but the reality is that everything that is going on in Latin American countries is coming from without those countries. In Brazil, today we had the news that the army is on streets to strangle the truck drivers' strike. It's a national strike. The economy is paralyzed. the fundamental cause of the strike is the fact that the oil company of Brazil, Petrobras, is being donated to foreign capital, to the banks, to the speculators in Wall Street, and this situation obliged the government, which is very submissive to foreign capital, to elevate the price of oil. And the strike has taken control of the country and the government, a very weak government from the beginning, a government that is the result of a coup d'etat, cannot cope with the strike and put the army to control the situation. This is a very graphic example of the political situation in Brazil. We have the coup destroyed all the institutions, revoked the Constitution of Brazil. The political regime that originates in the 1988 Constitution is dead. It no longer exists, in fact. And all the political powers that participated in the coup are in a state of bankruptcy, complete failure. That's why we are seeing today the army on the streets. Because it's not, of course, it's not natural. In Brazil, we have 500,000 soldiers of the military police, which is police, not army. We have a national security force of some 50,000 men, specially trained for civil situations, not military action. And there is no reason whatsoever for the army to intervene. The intervention of the army is a step forward for the army to control all the situation, because the situation is very volatile. Brazil is a country in a very deep recession, which is being added to a situation of inflation, uncontrolled inflation, and we could have a kind of explosion, popular explosion, at any moment. We have also a very critical institutional situation, because the people that organized the coup, they want to close the coup with democratic elections. The problem is that the main competitor is in jail, which is a very anomalous situation. It's quite evident that the elections are going to be contested by the population. If Lula, who is in jail, do not participate in the election, we could be facing some 50 to 60% of abstention in the election, which, of course, it's very obvious, would make the elections simply collapse. That's why the government, which has 3% of popular support, the actual government, made the army occupy the second most important state in Brazil, which is the state of Rio de Janeiro. The state is under intervention of the army, and now we have the army intervening in the strike. A curious, ironic situation is that a part of the strikers were in favor of the coup and even in favor of military coup. That's ironic, because this minority, it's not the majority of the strikers, they are being attended in the army because the army is going to intervene in their strike, to end the strike. The government tried to negotiate the strike. The leadership accepted a deal with the government, but the strikers decided to continue the strike, to go on, showing that what we have, in fact, is a wild strike with no leadership. And this situation could could take all the other workers in the country to a protest, paralyzing the economy. Yesterday, the petrol workers declared a national strike. That's why there are in the streets. The petrol workers, differently of the truck drivers, is a very organized and very political part of the working class, and a very powerful force in Brazil. The last total strike of the petrol workers was a disaster for the government, worse than the truck drivers' strike that we are seeing now. In some industrial regions of the country, we have strikes, isolated strikes, that could easily generalize to a general strike, which would make the government collapse. In this way, we have a very, very, very critical situation. Very few people are evaluating adequately the situation, but this is a very critical situation. As was said here, Brazil is a very important country in Latin America because of its size, population, economy, and a situation that escapes control in Brazil could compromise all the plans of imperialism for Latin America. That's the situation we have in the country at the moment. It's a very, very difficult situation. I think that one aspect of the situation we should stress is the situation of the leader of PT, Lula, who is in jail. Lula is the key to the situation in Brazil from the beginning of the coup. Many people at that time said that Lula was dead, that he was, because of the scandals of corruption, he wouldn't be able to sustain himself in the country's politics. It was a very flawed calculation. As the coup showed that its intention was to destroy national economy, was to destroy all the workers and in general the population rights, the leadership of Lula is more and more bigger. It has grown beyond all the expectations. He's in jail, and he's the first placed in the election. He's a decisive person in the elections, and to get him in jail, the political regime had to violate, in a very scandalous manner, all his political rights. Lula is in jail against the Constitution that nobody without all the appeals being exalted. In Brazil, we have 4 degrees of jurisdiction, and Lula was condemned on the 2nd degree of jurisdiction. Even so, the Supreme Court of Brazil, STF, has taken the decision to modify the Constitution to permit that very many people, left-wing people in particular, to be imprisoned. It's a very... In Brazil, as the press supports any kind of wild initiatives like this, it seems natural, but it's not. It's absolutely unnatural, the situation. And it's a situation that cannot be sustained, particularly by a regime which has no political force, no unity, the right-wing parties, the bourgeois parties, to realize this kind of consolidate, this kind of political adventures. In this way, if we see the situation very objectively, we can see that Lula holds the key to the political situation. In a certain way, that's why he said that he was perfectly well with his prison and everything. That showed a lot of calm, a lot of constraint regarding the situation, because he knows that he is the key element in the political situation. If the political situation escapes from control, from the government, from the regime, the only person in Brazil who has the authority to do anything is Lula. And the situation is going gradually to an even more critical advancement. That's the main point that we have to have in mind when we look at the Brazilian situation. Another key player in the situation is the army. The army commanders have given a lot of public declarations saying that if the situation deteriorates, escapes from control or anything like that, they are going to intervene. Those declarations have been ignored by the left-wing parties and organizations in Brazil. It's, in my opinion, it's a very big mistake, because the situation is the crisis is very deep, and those declarations are not for show. They are not idle declarations. They're for real, and the army can intervene because nobody is seemingly capable of controlling the situation. So we have this very critical situation. What are the left-wing forces which look at the situation more objectively doing? First, we are struggling for the liberation of Lula, because it's a very explosive contradiction of the political regime to have the most popular politician in the country in jail some months before the election. It's a very explosive contradiction. So I think that to have a very strong policy on this question is a central issue for any political movement in the country right now. We are defending Lula's candidacy. This is a very important thing to consider. Apparently, it would be a pacific question, non-debatable question, that Lula is the candidate against the coup. It's not so in Brazil. We have a very strong pressure from the right-wing institutions, the press, the parties of the bourgeoisie, trying to convince people that Lula is not a viable candidate from a legal point of view. And we have very many left-wing organizations saying the same thing, and saying to people, choose another candidate. Lula is not possible. He's not going to be candidate. And we have no other candidate that can effectively oppose the coup. Of course. Lula is the only candidate that could oppose the coup, that has popular support. If Lula is not candidate, for instance, we would have a very big crisis in the election. That's why the right-wing press says almost every day the left needs another candidate. They want to close the crisis with a kind of political maneuver. Well, Lula can be candidate legally. From a legal point of view, it's perfectly viable for him to be candidate. And for the right wing and the bourgeoisie to stop him from being a candidate, they will have to violate once more his rights. That's a very important question. Many people say, let's not struggle for Lula to be a candidate. What they are saying, in fact, is let not struggle for a person who has rights to exercise his rights. what's absurd, given the situation that we have. So, the question of Lula being a candidate is very important. We have to say, to be clear, that the elections in Brazil are sham. They're not real elections. No. If we take the fact that the main competitor is in prison, we can see clearly that it's not an election. The correct position for all the popular organizations and left-wing parties would say, if Lula is not candidate, we do not support elections. Nobody's going to win these elections against the parties that organized the coup. That's another reality, another fact that many people try to hide. They say, no, the left-wing parties, the left, can win the elections. That's nonsense. In the first place, because the person who could hypothetically win the elections is in jail. In second place, because the elections are going to be rigged by the authorities in Brazil. We have judges who said in the press that Lula cannot be candidate. What are they saying? That he cannot be candidate for a legal problem? No. They are saying that politically he cannot be a candidate. The judges, who should be impartial, who should be people distant from the everyday politics. So, if we think that in this situation anybody is going to win the elections against the coup, it's a delirious illusion. It's a very stupid thing to think. The only candidate that could not win the election, because this is a very difficult situation, but to face the coup is Lula. The PT, Lula's party, called on their supporters and Lula supporters to organize meetings for the launching of Lula's candidacy. I think this has a very special meaning at this time, because all the situation is turning around the question of Lula's candidacy. It's not an electoral move. It's a very important political move in general in the Brazilian situation. I think that it's important that the Brazilians who are living in other countries, they do something to show that we're not going to accept the fraudulent electoral process that is being organized to cover the coup d'etat. The actual government, Temer government, is completely paralyzed. Before the truck drivers' strike, we had many opportunities to observe this, to confirm that it's a paralyzed government. Either the people who organized the coup can make a very miraculous, let's say, political operation for the elections, or we can have a political explosion in the country, and a military intervention. It's a very critical situation. And it's not clear, analyzing the situation, that a military coup would be viable, because it has no real support in the population. It would be a political adventure. It would need zero opposition from the very big union and popular organizations, so zero. Because if a military coup at this moment has a serious opposition, which would be more natural, it would also collapse. We would have a situation that we have seen in Venezuela, when the military coup organized by the imperialism, collapsed by the popular reaction. Made the right wing of the army be defeated, and sent the country on a very left-wing path that we see now, which imperialism opposes very strongly. So we are living in Brazil at this moment a very decisive situation. It's not very clear in external events, but every time that something happens, it reveals the profundity of the crisis, like the strike at this moment. If the strike generalizes, the government could very easily collapse, because it's a non-government. So we have this situation. That's why the army is intervening. So that's we could say, the general picture of the political situation. Of course, we have very many secondary aspects of the situation going on, right? But I think that the interest of the public here at this moment is to capture the essential aspects of the situation. And we can, of course, in the questions from you, clear up some other aspects of the situation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Fazer o convite para amanhã.
Tá.
So, thank you. Just before we open for questions, I would like to say just a few words, and then also make an invitation to everyone present. Rui Costa Pimenta is he was founder of the PCO, which is the Workers' Coast Party, in 1995, and he was also he was candidate for Brazilian presidents 4 times. This time, 2018, he's giving up his candidacy to actually support Lula's candidacy, and that is very. We very welcome this, and this is, I think, it's very important for this moment that he just spoke about. Is the moment that Brazil is living in? That's it's very important for us, and for me, especially as a member of the Workers' Party, and for our activism. So he's also his first debate in Europe, and he's going around Europe to meet activists and talk about the situation. And this is the first ever. So tomorrow we will have a meeting with him because his weekly political analysis is very popular in Europe and around the world, and had great audience. And in my opinion, it's one of the best analyses that's been.
Thank you.
For the current Brazil current affairs. And so I would like to invite everyone for tomorrow at 12:30 at Rugby Tavern in Holborn, where we're going to have a special meeting with him in Portuguese for the Brazilian activists. And we're also going to take the opportunity to, with our Free Lula committee and with all the activists who are actually supporting Lula, we're going to launch the pre-candidacy of Lula in London. And that's with Rui Costa Pimenta, who's helping us to do it tomorrow at 12:30. And then after will be a weekly analysis, and everyone is going to be invited to stay as well at 3:30, and then watch it live where he's going to do his analysis. So now we're going to have open for a few questions. And I don't know if it's open to anyone who wants to contribute to the debate or to make a question, etc. So just, I think, Victor.
Well, first of all, congratulations for being a constructive proposition, unlike some of the left, which chose to boycott Lula. You're giving us your candidacy to support Lula. I'm going to ask you a question about a very big piece we have right now in the extreme right. So there to materialize the coup, they had a very early piece called Bolsonaro Out of the Cage. It was an open racist, sexist, sort of the dictatorship that the error that the dictatorship made was not killing enough people. My question to you is, how should the left react to this? Should we dismiss it completely so 2025 involves? Should we just say that as far as the government is going to get, that's the cap? Or do you think, I was thinking maybe the big media and the center right would not support someone so extremist, the establishment would not support someone so extremist. So that's not a threat. We should take this.
Well, I think it's a very real, very big threat. It's not clear if Bolsonaro can progress in the present election. He could. It's not impossible. It's not probable, but it's not impossible that he could be a very important contender in the election. It's not impossible. We had signs from very important parts of the bourgeoisie that they would favor a far-right candidate. One industrialist said that the market, using this kind of euphemism, does not want a center candidate. They want a right-wing candidate. What he's saying is an extreme right candidate. I don't know. I don't think so. It was in fact, it was the owner of the Lojas Americanas, Riachuelo, something like that. Riachuelo. But it's a very meaningful declaration. We do not want a candidate from the center. We want a candidate from the right. Well, in Paraguay, we had the victory of the right wing of the Colorado Party. In Colombia, we have the threat of the victory of the right wing of Colombia and his people. So it's a tendency, you see? I think that there is a faction of imperialists that favors right-wing candidates and dictatorships. Why? It's not, apparently, it's not logical. Well, the answer is the tasks that imperialism is putting on the shoulders of this kind of puppet government is very hard. It's going to meet a very hard resistance from the population. So it's natural that we have a very strong tendency in continental politics to the right. So Bolsonaro is not to be put down as an alternative. Another thing, when the bourgeoisie called the right wing to the streets to topple the Dilma's government, it was a sign that peaceful parliamentary means are not enough to face important unions. You see, the Central Union in Brazil, CUT, is the fourth largest union federation in the world. We have potentially a very explosive situation in the country. So the right wing is a tool to be used exactly in this kind of situation. We have to pay a very close attention to the right wing. We have something else. One of the commanders of the army, General Mourão, is organizing a very widespread movement of military officers, for the elections. According to him, they would have some 150 top military officers in the election this year, in the parliament. Well, everybody knows that fascism is in everywhere where we have seen it, originated from the armed forces. It's kind of professional circumstance. Excuse me? They are going to be candidate to governorship, Senate, and Congress.
Anyone?
Yeah.
Desculpa, eu não estou ouvindo direito. Perdão. Eu não ouvi.
And then getting the direct election, and that was more the same side of the last one.
It could be. It's a possibility. The problem is The problem we have with solutions. A solution depends on the problem to be solved is solvable. You can invent solutions for everything, but there are situations where you have no issue. That's the problem in Brazil. If you elect indirectly, directly, in parliament, in the popular vote, you have to face the situation of impopularity of all the candidates. We have to face the situation that by far the biggest party in the country has its leader in jail. It's difficult to, in reality, the bourgeoisie has to change the situation, not find a technical solution. The technical solutions are very complicated because the situation is very critical.
Okay. I want to ask you to raise your hands, okay?
Until the age of 16, the state was to have human returning power to overcome the issue. During 17, the idea was to have the election now. Right now, we don't have these two possibilities. Then you say that we have a general strike, the government should collapse. So what's the perspective? Because we are claiming for a general strike since the beginning to overcome this government. But if you look at now, what happens? If it collapses, what's going to happen? What's your...
Well, when I say that the government could collapse, I'm not saying the immediate consequence is going to be that the left parties, organizations, will tell one thing does not follow the other. The government could collapse and you could have a military intervention, for example. Or a temporary government elected by Congress. Many situations, but it would make the crisis grow deeper. The crisis would grow deeper. How's that?
Or resolve it, because it can go either way.
Yes, it's unresolved. Yes. The situation does not point to right or left. It depends how the situation is going to evolve. Well, let's put the things like this. The right imperialism are weak because they have no popular support. But they're strong because they have more conscience and organization and real power than the left. The left is lost in the situation from the beginning. During the preparation of the coup, we, our party, alerted that we had a coup coming. Many people said, you're crazy, you're drinking too much, anything. And we said, no, we have a coup and we have to prepare. Well, government toppled without very much resistance. That's the reality. It took most of the people unawares, the left disorganized, divided, and the situation followed that there was a discussion if we had to support the return of the government or forget the government toppled and go on we opposed the idea of forgetting the government, the coup, forgetting the coup. There was an expression at the time that was, we should move the leaf, turn the leaf. It was a crazy notion. The correct policy was to oppose the coup and ask for the return of the elected government. Well, some very intelligent people defended general elections. We said we have 3 or 4 months to begin the period of general election. It's a claim that does not have any reality. But the campaign around the elections obscured the struggle against the coup. Well, Lula was being judged. We said Lula is going to jail. And very many people, including people very close to Lula, said, no, it's not going to happen. I don't know. Such and such judge is going to do, I don't know what, and Lula is not going to jail. Lula is in jail. There was no serious campaign against his jailing. Now, there is no serious campaign for the liberation of Lula. Everybody is saying that the solution of the crisis is in the election. And we say it's a trap. You go to the election is completely controlled by the right wing. Lula is in jail, and they are going to organize a fraud and try to present the elected president and Congress as an institutional solution. That's their plan. It's not going to be so easy, of course, but that's what they are trying to do. And the left wing is going along all the time. The press says, oh, Dilma is finished. A big part of the left, Dilma is finished. Lula is finished. Lula is finished. If we go on like this, we're going to be trampled over by the right wing in a very catastrophic way. It's necessary to, first of all, to discuss, to clear the situation. We don't have any clear perspective. I mean, we don't have unity around any political perspective. So we need to gain the situation of unity, of clearness, and then we have to organize a very big movement against the coup around this kind of perspective. No coup d'etat, free Lula. Lula has to be a candidate. Elections without Lula are fraud. The problem is we don't have the necessary unity to go on. People who think like this, many people, are very much under pressure to change their mind. For example, the PT president, Gleisi Hoffmann, she's a mouthpiece for Lula, appointed by him. She's being under a very heavy pressure to forget Lula and approve another candidate. That's why Lula, personally, from the jail, proposed that the party make very many events for his candidacy. It's a political, a very important political move. That's the situation. It's not good. It's difficult.
Just a second, please. Please, just a second. Raise your hand, Marcia, please. My question is the continuation of the just there, please.
The alternative that we're looking for is an expansion of democracy, something that we have never done before. To call for the human rights of all prisoners to be both candidates and be able to vote is a very basic movement that we can all agree on. And then unite the opposition to be able to actually get together on that campaign of having human rights for all people working. There's also something that happens in Europe that people start noticing that the young people want to vote and be more participant in the future that we are co-creating. So another thing to actually embed in the campaign, the generation now, like us, all of us, with proper alternatives, is the human rights of prisoners. If we can make for that together, we will not only enhance the democracy to the next level of human rights, but also we will expand the human rights of people all over the world, fighting people who fight it.
You're saying prisoners in general, or political prisoners?
But once we personalize things, we have a situation with Lula that's very particular infringement of rights, and trying to impede the person from actually being a candidate in a country where he stands a chance of winning. So that is always human rights. But to extend empathy to all people who are in prison and prevent it from happening in Saudi Arabia or somewhere else, because we are able to show Brazil as in leadership of democracy, a real democracy in the 21st century, or not only deal with the crisis, but we prove the alternative. It's very simple. We are going to infiltrate at any level of power in the legislative or the governmental aspect. We just have to separate all the powers and then say that we need to be in place as well as corruption. So the basic concept is based on actually promoting evolution of democracy. We'll likely to get people on board from the left, right wing, but people have consciousness of actually expanding human rights and have passion for that. Also, with the arena of Brazil, the much bigger domain of public domain of actually humanity steps towards democracy. And we address the situation of very similar. Human rights and democracy is the forefront for the whole world. That rights that needs to be dealt with. And it's possible to be dealt with by experts here. When I went to the Superior School of War, I went to the generals that they offer as a magic technology. And it says, we do not appeal to irritation. We do not appeal to traitors and magic. We do not waste so much energy trying to get to find each other because we do that all the time. And that's not challenging. The challenging in the infringement of human rights in every operation complex and happening complex. Because people are alive, not only from the fire, talking about the life, but what is about time to do that is unite our forces for campaigns that we believe are fostering this type of humanity forward. Business is inherited from the 19th century, started in Europe. And then we are having the people who are going to do that wrong. So we have the main potential turning into the forefront of not a tragic comedy, but a new narrative. And I'm sure that it makes no difference for anyone that when we use aspects of what we were wrong, that from our opportunity we have turned into something that all humanity can benefit from. And we use ourselves as an experiment of uniting and really giving the things that we hope for in the democracy, the death.
Okay.
Just a second, please.
Well, The problem I see with what you said is that democracy, as well as human rights, it's an ambiguous concept. A very important example. American imperialism is calling for an invasion, boycott of Venezuela on the ground of human rights and democracy. Venezuelans and very many people in Latin America think that what is happening in Venezuela is the most democratic thing because it's a popular government. So you see, it's a concept that does not solve the problem and unite people. It's very difficult because it's manipulated. It's used according to a certain ideology. That's a problem. The second problem I see is that the movement in Brazil, for example, of right wing, but I could say also in Venezuela and many other countries, is not concerned with any rights, human or otherwise. They are for no rights, for the complete extinction of one part of the population. They're very, very violent, and they are against any notion of human rights or democracy. For example, Bolsonaro, the right-wing candidate in Brazil, he is saying openly that his government program is to kill a lot of people, independently of if those people are guilty of anything or not. It's very complicated. We need to have an effective alternative that is capable in action to group people. It's not a problem of having this or that idea. It's much more difficult than that. You see, in Venezuela, you have a division. Why? Because all the rich people are against the government. It's a question of pure material interests. So they don't care about any kind of idea. For external propaganda, they say that Venezuela is anti-democratic, violates human rights and everything. It's a rotten kind of filth that they use to fight against Venezuelan people. It's very, very politics. It's a very nasty business in the last instance.
Thank you. I just would like to ask you, just a second, I would like to ask you to raise your hands for questions, okay? That's Silvia and then Vilma, please. Silvia and Vilma. Okay, thanks.
You mentioned earlier is parallel what's happening in Venezuela and people rose to support against the coup. And in Brazil now, if people go to the streets, everybody will join all the unions to bring down the coup. And the military reacts. What, in your opinion, the likelihood that people, talking about general people, apart from the unions, what's the likelihood that they will, in some degree, towards the Venezuelan?
It is possible. I think that we have a very distorted idea of the tendencies among the Brazilian people. For example, I don't believe that Lula has 35% of the vote. I think he has much more. It's difficult to know. For example, an anecdote. Some days ago, I was having lunch in a restaurant, and one of the waiters came to me and asked me if I was going to be candidate. And I said, no, we're supporting Lula this time. And he said, here in the restaurant, we have 12 employees. 11 are for Lula and 1 for the PSDB. It wasn't a very poor restaurant in the outskirts of the town. Well, I don't know if this is to be generalized, but I've seen a lot of this. It's difficult to measure. That's the first problem. Second, Brazil is a country where politics, especially the popular reaction, is very complex. Normally, you have a crisis, a sector of the dominating class, ruling class, acts, and a long time after that, the population reacts. It's not synchronized. You have this fact and you have a popular reaction. It's not typical of Brazil. That's one thing. Another thing, it's a country with many popular, spontaneous reaction to crisis. A reaction which nobody controls. So it's quite difficult to predict what is going to happen. But based on the country's experience, I think we can say that it's very possible that a situation which is deteriorating very fast conducts a popular explosion. It's not difficult. It's not impossible. It's not to be ruled out. I think it's one of the variables of the situation. If it would be a fourth variable, it could be. I think that popular reaction, military action, and of course, various kind of maneuvers in the institutions they are all on the table at this moment. It's a very fluid situation. Excuse me?
What did the population do?
Let me tell you something. When you talk about Venezuela, you always believe that it's the people on the street that, turn around the situation during the coup d'etat. And that's only part of the story. Because the other part was that people inside the army worked against the coup. Remember, we have some kind of insurrection in 1989, explosion. What you're talking about, explosion. The result of that explosion was 3,000 people killed. And the system lost the ideological control they used to have on the population because people say, well, you are killing us. We don't believe in you. That was the big change. That made it easy to organize. And then we have two uprisings, military uprisings in 1992 with Chavez. When Chavez became president, he became president because he said, well, you know, there are many ways to get into power. One way is the electoral way. If we cannot win an election, we're going to do something else. And so he became president by election because they knew that he was going to do something else. They closed that way. So the countries are quite different, but there is a variable in the political situation that had to do with the armed forces. And it seems that in the analysis you are making, the armed forces are totally controlled by the right wing. That's not true. That's never true. But that's a variable that you have to take into account. The other thing is that the difference with Venezuela was that we were a movement that have been involved in two uprisings. When we won the election in 1998, that's a big difference with what happened in Brazil. Because in Brazil, you just have a party winning an election. That was not the situation in Venezuela. We won the election with the movement, and then we changed the system immediately. We changed the constitution. And that's why they tried to do in Venezuela what they did in Brazil, but it's impossible. They cannot do that in Venezuela. Because the system is totally different. You know? So that's the variable that you have to take into account. In relation to the human rights things, you know, I remember when there was the invasion of Libya, the destruction of the government of Libya, that some people in the left organization in Europe were criticizing Venezuela because we were against invasion. They said that we had to support the human rights in Libya. And the answer we have for those people, the left organization in Europe, is that they live in Europe, they don't live in Latin America, they don't live in the same country war where they used to make and destroy our country. Because if they have the opportunity to be in a country like Libya and look at what they're doing against the country, they would immediately change, you know. But it's different to live in Europe and look at the destruction of a country that live in that country, not for the consequences of the destruction. So human rights is a tool. Why the U.S. have been unable to use human rights against Venezuela? Because they need the Organization of American States, a statement, a formal statement of the Organization of American States declaring a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, and with that statement, immediately they will intervene. Because that's why they use this discussion of human rights, trying to make the situation worse, and then use the argument of intervene in Venezuela. If you look at the situation of human rights in Brazil, in Colombia, Mexico, and Central America, you see it's worse, it's horrible. In the election in Brazil, in Mexico, I think that 200 candidates were killed in this election. I know I talk about that. Why? You know, that's the question. If you want to talk about human rights, you need to make that difference about what's going on in terms of human rights and why they always talk about, for instance, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela. Why? Why when the 3,000 people were killed in Venezuela, the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, it took them like 10 years to make a public statement about what those people. You know, that's the real situation of human rights.
Okay. Just a second, please.
Let me add something to what he said.
Minha viagem por aqui, eu até fui lá ontem, eu faço parte do grupo de Paris. Então, eu peço desculpa, companheiros, obrigado, Rui, obrigado, Nanda. O pouco que eu entendi e recebi, vou comunicar com meus companheiros. Desculpa um tempo, pouco, mas pouco que eu ouvi foi muito. Lula livre, Morriera livre e viva o Brasil livre.
I'm sorry, Rui wants to...
Let me add something.
Yeah,
I agree with the idea that the right wing does not have a perfect control of the army. That's one problem in this situation, because a coup could lead to a division in the armed forces. It's a problem. So they are very cautious, but they are moving forward with the armed intervention. That's one thing. The second thing I would like to point out is that Venezuela is a very rich experience to understand the situation in Latin America. We had very many situations there. We have an attempt to a military revolt from the left, attempted right-wing coup d'etat, various revolutionary movements in the masses of the people, elections, imperialist attack, everything. So we have to have facts to understand the reality. Many people, being a little arrogant, could say that, no, Venezuela is a small country compared to Brazil and everything. We have to remember that Venezuela used to be the most stable country in South America for very many long years. For there was a very deep economic crisis, and the situation changed. That's because Venezuela is an oil-rich country. It gave to the country stability. So this fact illuminates the events that came after. So it's a very important political reference for all Latin America to study, to understand well.
Thank you. Vilma and the lady here in front, and then Vicente. And then the other guy okay, for Vilma, Vicente. No, thanks. It's a lot. Okay, Vilma, please.
All the administration is in power over a year ago now. And there were some representatives of Amnesty International based in Brazil, seeing what is happening around the as well. Throwing all the reactions that happened, that were there. Tear gas from everybody. And came with the big ambulance, the big car, with the police, with the horses and everything. And I questioned them. And they said, oh, we can't do anything. I said, well, you need to wait for them to kill, to imprison, to massacre the people, to then go and do something about it. And that was then I realized it was life and story. There is no human life in this world. It has to be for a hell of a long time. You can go and ask anybody in the years, in all the black people. And they will tell you how they live, how they survive, how they put up with the regime, especially the last few years. My question is, what does it take for PT, for the left? And I know your position, you said many times that I watched your program. But what does it take to call the people a million? We need to have at least a million maybe we thought of that going to Porto Alegre, and we thought of that people going to Cuba. I went to Porto Alegre, I went to the special because I wanted to go. But to go to Cuba, I couldn't go. But, if they call a million people there, I tell you, I'll make a campaign in London for people to go. And there will be people going. Even, obviously we don't want another Syria in Brazil, but what does it take? Look, everything which is going wrong, every single situation is going wrong. And Lula is in prison, and Lula is basically part of our modern Brazil, of Brazil with a little bit of human rights, a little bit of decency, and so the people that live outside like me, that have my family is here, so no intention of really kind of going back. And I don't need to be doing this, but I want to be proud of my country, be proud of my people. I don't want anybody suffering anymore or starving. And now we've seen lots of people in the streets, begging. They don't have families, whole families that I've seen in Avenida Paulista. They actually literally in the street. Because I've done my local job, we have nothing. So it's getting worse and worse by the day.
Well, the problem, the basic problem is that normally for 1 million people to take the streets, you have to have organizations that organize this movement. We have a situation that most of the left in Brazil was thrown in a very deep confusion by the coup. The coup is a complex operation. It has the appearance of an institutional movement, but it's false. It's a movement of the bourgeoisie, the right wing, covered by institutional appearance. It's very deceptive. Most of the left do not understand the real situation. In the PT, they think that by some kind of miracle, the situation is going to be reestablished. The previous situation. It's not going to. They think that if you negotiate here, there, with different authorities, you can avoid the problems of the coup. It's a very widespread mentality. It's natural, because in politics you always have a rule, a natural, immanent rule of economy of ethics. Nobody's going to do B if A is much simpler to do, even if A is going to be wrong and ineffective. People are going to be only if they, by experience, arrive to the conclusion that A is not going to function. So everybody's thinking this moment this. Let's go to the election. Let's act within the law. But in Brazil, there is no law. There is no constitution. There is no election, in fact. Only they don't realize that the situation is this. That's the problem. They think that the problems are going to be solved by some miracle coming, nobody knows from where. That's the situation, because the unions and popular organizations, PT, etc., they could put, I don't know, about 1 million. I've never seen a million people rally. It's very difficult. But 100,000, which is a very massive, gigantic rally, they could do it. Yeah, no, there wasn't.
What about 70?
No. No.
Sure.
No. No, because everybody exaggerates. The press says 50,000. The Brazilians like very much football. You go to a football arena, stadium, where you have 50,000 people, you're going to be, how many people is 50,000 people? I went to football matches that you had to wait 3 hours to go home. You couldn't get to buses, you couldn't get to your car. 50,000 people. It's a very huge rally. 1 million would cause a catastrophic situation.
Then police, and then they will, helicopter and kill us all, basically.
Oh, they lie systematically. When there was the right-wing rally in São Paulo, they said 1 million, 7 million. Our comrades in PCO, we measured the street. You can't put 1 million people on that street, even if you put 4 stores of people.
Yeah, just before I would like to add something that because she was in Porto Alegre, and Porto Alegre is where I come from, and apparently it was one of the biggest ever rally that we had in Porto Alegre, because it's different, but like if you compare Porto Alegre with São Paulo and Rio, it's very different. So we had apparently 50,000 people in the rally, the Esquina Democrática, we call it, Democratic Corner, and it was like it was massive for my city. That's what I wanted to add. So anyway, there's that lady there in the front, and then Vicente, and then the guy behind. Please.
Right, every North American first, and the rest of South America, second, third, fourth. Why do you think it's carrying on since the last 200 years, the same situation? The Anglo-Saxonic language is definitely dominating the Latin American side. And can you explain if you know if there's any seer or any organizations from North America and other institutions, the civilizing South America, to go back again to this critical situation of the greatest state of Latin America? Because South America is far more rich, far more important than North America since the beginning of the nations of North and South. Can you explain in any way there is someone or some organization, including CIA, in the middle of this digitalization of the reviewing of, again, South America completely apart?
Certainly, we have this situation, but we have to observe too that economic and political power means almost automatically cultural dominance. One thing follows the other. But in Brazil, for example, we have many organizations that are funded by American government and American capitalists. We have to pay attention to religious organizations the evangelical sects that we have in Brazil are an instrument of political influence in the country. It's by purpose. It's not by accident. So we do have an offensive in the cultural terrain that is trying to impose a foreign culture, foreign language to Latin America. It's most certainly that it's going on.
Thank you. What can South America do? What can we do? If they are not educated, if they don't even see these things, it's not good to follow all these North American organizations and churches, which they can't support the people with their really to create a great destabilization. What can we do to help Latin America?
I think that political action is closely linked to culture. If you have a political nationalist movement, like we see in very many countries in Latin America, Venezuela, Bolivia, etc., you also have a cultural changing that's going on. People value their own culture. They oppose the foreign culture because it's also foreign intervention in politics and economy. So I think everything is connected, and politics is it's not the only means, but it's the most important. It's the locomotive of reaction.
You said that people perceive that the statement was made by the RPF, ignoring that was a mistake. How do you think the left have reacted? And any reaction
in Brazil against the coup? Well, if one very important thing in politics is if you're prepared or not for the certain situations. If you are caught unawares by a chain of events, it's difficult to react. You have to process what's going on. So first, you need to believe that there is the possibility of a coup. At the time of the coup, I heard very many times the phrase, Brazil is a solid democracy. Nothing is going to happen. Well, if you think like this, you're going to be taken by surprise by everything that's happening. So it's a factor. And this situation, this subjective, mental, psychological situation, it has not changed because the coup was not going to happen. Lula was not to be condemned. Lula was not going to jail. Now, the left is going to win the election. So, to react, we need to process all these delusions, political delusions. Well, first of all, I think that the left is...
How do you believe that the going to have that, or that the Lula going to be convicted?
What sort of reaction?
Because if you think that's going to be jailed, and you think it's very important that he should not go to jail, you react. You are subjectively prepared to react.
What effect reaction should have?
Well, I think that in Brazil, it's a kind of paradoxical. The reaction is bigger than in most countries. Because in Ecuador, no real reaction at the situation. The government was taken over and no reaction. Paraguay, almost no reaction. So in Brazil, the reaction is relatively big, first of all. Why? Because there is a discussion on the situation, prepared in a certain measure people to react, first of all. Second, PCO, we've reacted, but we are a very small party. So we have been trying to stimulate, let's say, the PT to react, the unions to react. If they react or reacted, we would be very much better situation right now. For example, she referred to Porto Alegre, Curitiba. People was not called to go in the very large manner. You see, I'll give you a practical example. The CUT, the Central Union, has 4,000 unions affiliated. Each union has at least 20 members in the leadership. So, only talking about the top leadership, you have 80,000 people. We didn't have any rally with 80,000 people. It's a mathematical thing. The organizations are paralyzed. They do not know what to do. They don't see the importance of what's going on. They don't see the threat. It's very easy to show. With this, if you add the PT organization, they have an organization in almost every one of the 7,000 cities of Brazil. It's a lot of people. Where are these people? That's the question. That's the question. You have 60 members of parliament, senators, 4 state governors. It's simple to deduct that they are not seeing the importance of taking the streets. It's very easy. No, I don't think it's a problem of selling out. because their heads are on the stake too.
Okay, just I think it's the last question, or maybe the one, that one.
It's quite interesting. About the war, and what to say about Lula and Brazil. Just changes the name of Lula and Brazil to Turkey and other new things and decisions. There's partly the current French leader is in prison, and there's an election now as well, and they don't want to start the election. And as you said, the left wants to split, and they have no idea what to do. And but my question is, although, of course, imperialism will never voluntarily give up on any part of the world, Brazil, Venezuela, and the rest of the world. But if Lula was elected again, what do you want Lula to do this time differently than last time?
Well, if he was elected, we have to understand that a government is based on what took this government to power. In this case, this situation, it would be a popular kind of uprising against the regime. So the government would have to reflect, in a certain measure, this new situation, which was not the case when Lula was elected the first time. Governments are not all powerful. They can do things they want, but they act mostly under the pressure of social classes around them. So the relation of political and social forces is fundamental to define what kind of government you're going to have. It's, for example, why the Venezuelan government is much more radical, let's say, in this way, than the PT government. It's not only because the leaders had more radical ideas, but they had the popular support and pressure to do that. I could be elected. I want to socialize the production. But how are you going to do this yourself? A government cannot operate miracles. So I think that the Brazilian bourgeoisie fears PT government, not only because it would be the same, but on their eyes it would be much worse than the PT governments, worse for the bourgeoisie.
Thank you. I think we are running out of time, and I would like to thank you everyone coming tonight, and also a special thank you to Marcus from the Venezuelan embassy for giving this space for us, and of course Rui. And again, I would like to ask you to come tomorrow at 12:30 Rugby Tavern and 1:30 at Rugby Tavern in Holborn. Just Google, you're gonna find it. It's easy. And then you can ask more questions, and we can continue this debate. We're here. It's gonna be in Portuguese, but even if you don't speak Portuguese, you're more than welcome to come for our Turkish comrade and our British comrade from Labour Party as well. So thank you, and I think that it's I don't know.
Sorry. I'll just quickly carry out for the both of you saying amount of money we have to help us in this story. I will try to fascinate with a lot of
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Please.
You want to say something?
Yeah, I think he wants to say something quickly.
It's very quickly. I'm the only thing between yourselves and they have time. I know that. So I'm very short. My only thing with Father, I'm making a film about the role of media and the coup d'etat, about the role of global. It's called the coup d'etat factory. I've got some slides on this.
Tá? Tá bom. Só meu inglês está bem pior do que eu pensava. Há muito tempo que eu não falo inglês.
Ótimo. É que você está acostumado a falar, entendeu? As pessoas...
Falar com maior desenvoltura, né, em português.
Como as pessoas estão muito acostumadas às regras, é complicado. Eu conheço mais da metade.
Mas tá bom, o pessoal tá animado, né? Então, um interesse grande.
Sim, amanhã...
É uma coisa positiva.
Amanhã vai ser mais... Vou falar
Não, eu que agradeço vocês. Foi muito boa a reunião. Você tirou foto, Gabriel?